Okay, hello everyone. It's really great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's really exciting, and thank you for the delicious curry. I really enjoyed it. I think the pickled chilies were maybe my favourite condiment. I don't know if anyone else had any top condiments, but they were my favourite. So yes, I'm Louise. I'm the head of user research at an organisation called the Central Digital and Data Office, or CDDO for short. And it's a civil service organisation, and we lead what's called digital and data in government, so what they call the digital and data function. So there's a lot of words, there's a lot of acronyms, but I won't bore you with those. My job there is to work with my colleagues to try and help user researchers help deliver better services for people. So that's what I do. Anyway, I got into this after studying history and animation, so I did not study, I didn't come through, I guess, what you call a traditional route, and a lot of what I learnt on the job. I'm the kind of person who likes to read a book and then go to work and experiment and see whether or not it helps me to improve my practice. And that's where I came across doing mixed methods research, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight, if I can get the remote to work. Yes, result. Okay, so I use mixed methods in my practice for this reason, because it's a way of finding the people in big numbers. And I found that when you do that, it helps to give your research insights more impact. So this evening, I'm going to take you through the things I've learnt as I've been experimenting with the things I've read in books and talking to other people about it, and share some tips, so hopefully you'll be able to go away and try out mixed methods in your own practice. But before I get into that, I thought I should probably explain what mixed methods means to me. So mixing methods means mixing quantitative and qualitative data in a single research study. I'm going to say quant and qual from now on, because I just can't pronounce quantitative and qualitative all night. So many of us use these different kinds of data in our research practices. We might be looking at analytics seeing a problem and then going away and doing some usability testing to understand it better, or we might be doing a scale survey in order to understand some things that we saw in our depth interviews. Doing a mixed method study means using qualitative and quantitative methods in the same study. And so, but before we kind of get to that, I thought I should talk to you about what I understand by quant and qual. So to do that, I'd like to introduce you to my cat, Archie. I had to get a cat in there somehow. Anyway, we adopted Archie a few years ago, and he likes to chase bees. It's kind of an interesting cat. As you can see, he's also very hardworking. We don't really know what he's been doing with that laptop. It was raining outside. We think he may have been watching bee videos on YouTube, not sure. Anyway, I interviewed Archie about his love of bees, and he told me that, yes, bees are great, and they're fun to chase, but they do sting, so, you know, he might move on to something else. Anyway, Archie is one of approximately 10.8 million cats in the UK. He's also a black cat. Black cats are less likely to be adopted than other coloured cats. Intriguing fact, we'll come back to that later. Anyway, what I've given you here is some qual and some quant data. So the qual is my anecdotes about Archie. I mean, if I was doing it properly, they wouldn't be anecdotes, but, you know, I'm sharing my personal experiences with our cat. And the quant is the stats and the facts that I've got from the internet. And mixing them together like this helps you to understand more about what's going on with Archie, or what's going on with black cats, hopefully. Okay, so that's how I understand quant and qual data, but what about the methods that we use to collect them? Yes. Okay, so these are some examples of quant and qual methods. or I'm sure they're very familiar to all of you. They're things that we do frequently in our jobs, and some of them can be both. So usability testing, for example, when done at scale in a benchmarking study, is a quant method, or something like card sorting you can use in your qualitative studies as a way of helping to shape the conversation and kind of dig into particular aspects of how people think about something. And there are a myriad of tools available to us to execute these kind of methods. But doing a mixed method study isn't so much about the tools we use, it's about the processes that we go through and the analysis that we do. So, don't feel like you have to have the latest, shiniest tool. You can just use what's available to you. So, I'm going to talk you through a kind of a process that I went through on a project that I did some years ago now. So, like any other research project, the success of a mixed method study is down to where you start. If you get it right from the beginning, it can take a little bit longer than people might expect, but if you get it right, you scope it correctly, and you get the data that you need in order to have the impact that you want to have. Okay, so I always start my research with these kind of questions. I'm sure they're familiar to all of you. The answer to these questions help me to deliver research studies that do something that's useful. So who are we doing the research for? What do they need to know? What do they want to do with the research insights? How much time do we actually have to complete the research? So some time ago, I worked on gov.uk. Is everybody familiar with what gov.uk is? Yep, okay. I imagine many of you have probably used it at some point. Yep, okay. So I worked with the navigation and search team, and working on navigation and search on gov.uk is a really interesting experience. It's incredibly complex to kind of think about how you might navigate all the content of the UK government. Fascinating challenge. If you ever get the opportunity, I recommend it. Anyway, so I was working on gov.uk, and we'd been asked to do some research or to help to improve some travel guidance. And we had a small team. The team had developed a prototype, and we wanted to test the prototype to see how it performed against the existing journey. And we needed to learn some things to help iterate the prototype, but we also needed to learn some things to help persuade our stakeholders in other organisations that we should change the live journey. And these were stakeholders who weren't as familiar with qualitative user research practice as many of us in this room. And they were much more comfortable with numbers-based evidence. So we thought the best approach was to mix our methods, because then we'd be able to give people the kind of information that they were more familiar with. Okay. Nope. Okay, so mixing methods is as much about collaboration as it is about different types of data. So some time ago, I was talking to my manager, and we were talking about, what I needed to do for L&D, and I said, well, I'd like to do a HCI course or, something. And she, because I think if I want to advance my career as a user researcher, then I need to know more methods. And she looked at me and just said, Louise, you really don't need to do that. You don't need to know all the methods. Nobody can know all the methods. It's impossible. What you need to know is how to learn a new method and then how to apply it, and how to work out if it's appropriate for your study. So I thought this was great advice. I was very grateful to her for pointing me in the right direction. But I also thought it was really applicable when you talk about mixed methods, because there's a great temptation to think that you need to know all the things about stats and Google Analytics and things like that. And actually, it's a really good opportunity to find other brains that you can work with, other people with amazing stat skills or incredible analytics powers. Um, I mean, I love data, don't get me wrong. I really like to kind of mess about in the data and look for patterns. And I mean, it's one of the reasons I got into user research. But I know enough about doing that kind of analysis to know how much I don't know. I've been really lucky to work with some really amazing people who have given me the benefit of their knowledge and their extra capacity. And I think the other thing about bringing other people in is it's also an opportunity to bring them on the research journey with you. We have this thing in government user research where we talk about user research as a team sport. And the idea is that you bring everybody along with you on the research journey, and then everybody understands the insights when you get to the end. So the whole thing has a lot more impact. Okay, so find other people to work with. I was really lucky because I was working with a really excellent, what we call a performance analyst. Is a performance analyst a role? I wondered this a lot recently. Is a performance analyst a role that exists outside of government? I can see a few. I mean, basically, they're quant researchers, really. They kind of, and they often specialise in different kinds of analytics, and they're all magical. And if you happen to work in a team with one, it's great. So I worked with someone called Hal, and we worked on this project together, and this travel guidance project, and we had decided that in order to work out what the team should do with this prototype, we would benefit from mixing our skills together in a single study. And so we had to start with our research question or our objective. And luckily for us, it was pretty straightforward. Is the prototype easier to use than the live site? So that was pretty easy. But always in a mixed method study, good to do that together. Okay. Nope. Yes. Okay. So the thing about, so we had our research objective, and the team had this lovely prototype. But in order to work out which of us were going to do what, so what kind of quant methods we'd do and what qual methods we'd use, we needed to break things down a bit because the team had created the prototype to solve some problems. And we defined those problems in what we call user needs, but you might call problem statements, or you might have job stories, just some way of capturing what the problem is that the user's having. And they designed the prototype to kind of solve these problems, and they'd use various hypotheses. And I was very excited to see Pelin talking about hypotheses earlier. It's, yeah, definitely recommend, always use hypotheses. And yeah, to kind of help everyone understand what design decisions they'd made in the prototype, so then we knew what we were looking for, and yeah, what kind of changes we might be looking for. So we had decided to make a single page of content instead of multiple pages of content, and we'd also decided to signpost people from content that was not so much related, but more adjacent to the information that was in the page, but just to kind of help guide people who might not be aware that they needed to know this information. So anyway, this had all been captured in hypotheses, which was really useful for Hal and I, because what we wanted to know was what people thought would change, because then we could work out what indicators we should look for, what indicators have changed when we were doing our research. And then we could work out what methods we'd use for measuring those changes. So in the end, it seemed to us that the logical thing to do was to run some usability testing, so we could look at the prototype and the existing journey in a lab-based environment and talk to people about their experiences, and at the same time look at the analytics for the existing journey and see how that was performing, and then we could bring that together at the end. And one of the reasons we wanted to look at the existing journey was, like in any kind of study like this, we needed to know what was happening now. Because if we didn't know what was happening now, how are we going to know what was going to change? I mean, those of you who've done A/B testing would recognise the idea of doing like an AA study before you do your A/B, so you know how significant your change is. And so we were kind of using a similar kind of idea. We'd have our baseline and then we'd know what was different. So that's what we decided to do. Okay. Nope. This is interesting. All right. So before I move on to how we ran the study, I just wanted to pause for a moment and talk about where you can get the data from when you do mixed methods, because it is really everywhere. And there's so many places you can go to get really useful data that you can use in your study without having to, do your own giant survey. So I worked for a long time. I worked for an organisation that worked with a lot of small charities and public sector kind of organisations. So you can imagine quite small budgets, short timelines. And so I got quite used to scavenging around for different kinds of data. It was quite fun, really. And so, you can go to places like the Office for National Statistics, has loads of stuff. Lots of government departments publish open data, universities, lots of research that's all out there, and we should build on it. So, data. Now, how we ran the study. It was pretty straightforward, really, because like I was saying, how I was doing his analysis, I was doing our usability testing, and we planned it and ran it over the same week. So we'd sat down, because we were running it together, because we wanted to do it as a single study, we designed the scenarios we were using for the usability testing together, and then he used them when he was doing his analysis of user journeys as well. So we had an idea so we were able to compare in the end. We'd basically already started thinking about our analysis. And that is the next thing. Okay, so you've got all your data you've collected through your quant and qual methods, and then the next thing you do is to do your analysis. For me, this is always actually where the fun starts. So we'd collected our journey data, we'd observed our lab participants, and we'd worked together throughout. Each of us had approached the analysis in our usual ways, and we'd understood that the prototype was doing a pretty good job. So when we came together to review our data, it was really exciting to see patterns repeated across the data, and really reassuring. But there's a couple of things that I just wanted to kind of go through that are important to remember when you're doing your analysis. So these are kind of some things that, I learnt through my experiments, you might say, in my mixed methods journey. So working with your team to do your analysis is really useful. When you're working that closely together, like Hao and I were, you can start to see things in the same way. So it's always good to bring other people in with their different perspectives, just to kind of check your own biases. I mean, having the quant and qual will do that for you to an extent, but it's always, the more brains involved and the more perspectives, the more challenge you can have, and that's really useful. Pay attention to the small numbers. Any quant data has its small numbers. These are often called outliers or edge cases or stress cases. They're often where you find the kind of really interesting things that you might need to investigate further, or the things that challenge the insights that you have about the outcomes your thing's trying to achieve. So it's really good to make sure you have a look at those. And something that doesn't happen very often, so this might be, 3 people, can have a really dramatic impact on their life. And I mean, this is something we think about a lot when we're designing things for government, because they kind of have to work for everyone. So, it's good to pay attention to the small numbers. So we've got Archie back again. So just because 2 things happen together doesn't mean that one thing causes the other. So you might be able to see here that Archie has no tail. And Archie also likes to open doors. We think he knows the cat food lives in there sometimes. So anyway, everyone thinks their cat's really smart, don't they? So yeah, but so the fact that he doesn't have a tail and he likes to open doors are two things about Archie, but one thing doesn't cause the other. Using mixed methods can help you mitigate this kind of thing, this kind of correlation-causation thing, because you might observe something in your usability sessions and think, oh, wow, maybe those two things cause each other, or one causes the other. But then you might find a quant data set that says, actually, hello, no, there are lots of cats that like to open doors, and plenty of them have tails. Okay, so this is the last thing I sort of wanted to talk about, how you kind of pull this all together into a story. So telling the story of your mixed method study is about mixing together the quant and qual so that you're making the most of each data type's strength. So qual personalizes and helps you to understand the kind of complexity and the humanity and all that kind of delicious stuff that we love as user researchers. And the quant helps you describe the scale of what you're seeing. So think about what your stakeholders need to know and what your insights are telling you. Okay, so coming back to Archie again. Oh my God, you're going to be so sick of Archie. Anyway, so I just wanted to go back to this though, because I wanted to go back to what I'd put on this slide, because it's information that I've shared with you about Archie. There is no real insight. There's not really a story. There's some facts about cat adoption, and there's some information about stuff that Archie likes to do. But it doesn't really explain to you why you should care. And the other thing I did was not tell you why black cats are aren't adopted as often. I imagine that might be quite annoying to some people. I would have found it really annoying, but I'm professionally nosy. So, but it is, yeah. So basically, black cats aren't adopted as often because because of superstitions people have about black cats, and also because they don't photograph as well. So there's kind of two issues, I think. So people prefer more colourful cats, basically. So yeah, so I kind of missed a trick there, really, because what I didn't do was actually give the answer to the question that was kind of obvious. And when you're telling your story, make sure you answer the questions that people ask at the beginning. It seems like a no-brainer, but it's really easy kind of when, I'm sure many of you have had this experience where you're kind of deep in the data and you found this amazing insight that's just like, wow, and then you go back to the team and they just really don't care because it's not what they wanted to know and they're on a really tight deadline. So yeah, make sure you answer people's questions. It's really helpful. And when Hal and I did our travel guidance project, that's what we tried to do, and we had the mixed methods data in order to help us to do it. Okay, and like sort of building on that, answer people's questions, but also tell them why it's important. So when we worked with the product manager, Hal and I, when we were working on the travel guidance, to put together the story of our prototype. And because he was going to have to deliver the news to various stakeholders who weren't entirely convinced that they needed to change the journey and make a case for change. Because that's what we're doing, really. We're making a case for change. And to do that, people need to know why the thing that you've learnt is important. And it's down to how you tell the story. Nope. See, that was going to be really good. Now you're going to be really disappointed. Yay. Anyway, because remember, it's a story. As with all stories, you've got a narrative arc, you've got characters, you've got peril, you've got resolution. So when you're combining your qualitative and your quantitative insights, give examples with of things like use infographics or charts or even simple stats to add drama and make it really compelling and really tell the story of what you've learned, because that helps people to understand the significance of your data. Oh, whoops. No, C. Okay. And there's always one more way. There's always another way to tell a story. And I just wanted to share a couple of things, a couple of places that I go to for inspiration, because when you're kind of bringing together this kind of data, it's great to get inspired about different ways of doing it. So, you know, for example, look at news websites. Data journalists do this kind of thing all the time, and they do a really good job. People like, sorry. Yeah, 1 minute. Okay, I feel the pressure. Yeah, so there's a guy called Hans Rosling who does TED Talks. You can find him on YouTube. He does the most amazing talks using bubble charts, stories from his childhood, and Lego about the state of the world. Really recommend. And he also, there's another project that's worth looking up called Dollar Street, which is this amazing project where they got people from around the world to photograph the same things in their homes. And it's a really interesting way of kind of taking something qualitative, like a photo of someone's home, and turning that into quant. Okay, so finally, I can fit it in 1 minute. These are my things that kind of points to take away, I guess. Make sure you take time to plan, because in mixed methods, that's going to set you up for success. Involve other people with their giant kind of magical data brains, because that's really good. Use your quant methods to understand what and how big. Use your qual methods to understand why, and mix it together to tell a really interesting, compelling story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Louise.